Cool. So I'm Darren with GitLab, and I'm talking with Aaron at Tulsa Remote. So we were connected by a mutual friend and an advocate in remote work. So this is our first conversation together, and I just wanted to ask Aaron about Tulsa Remote, how he came into it, what remote works means to him, and then if he has any questions for me, we'll go from there.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for taking some time to talk with me. So yeah, my name's Aaron Belsley. I'm the executive director of Tulsa Remote, which is an initiative of George Kaiser Family Foundation, which is a nearly $4 billion foundation based here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Its mission is to ensure that Tulsa is the best place for a child to be born, grow, and succeed. Tulsa Remote adds to that mission by helping create the most vibrant community possible for people who live here in Tulsa. So we launched Tulsa Remote last November, so November 2018. It was going to be just a little experiment. We were going to invite 20 or 25 remote workers to come and live in Tulsa for a year in exchange for $10,000 paid throughout the year, co-working space at a local co-working place that we have here, and then community development opportunities. But we ended up going viral, over 2.5 billion in reach. We had over 10,000 people apply in less than 10 weeks. I actually closed down the application process, and we were still getting about 125 applicants a day. It was insane because we had to go through the applications to pick our people. We expanded the program to bring in 100 people the first year. In total, up to this point, we've had 115 people, including partners, move to Tulsa through Tulsa Remote. And then we just launched our second year on October 29th, and we're bringing in 250 people this year. So it's been incredibly successful, more than anybody ever expected, and it's really added to what's going on here in Tulsa, which is there's already a lot happening here in Tulsa, but it's even added to that. So that's the basic outline of it.
That's incredible. I'm curious, was it the financial incentive that created all of the applications, or was it a desire to get away from the frenetic pace of an urban environment, or something I'm not mentioning, some combination? I'm just curious what the feedback was on why people were drawn to apply in the first place.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think anybody, at least the successful individuals that we brought in, and the successful individuals that everybody's trying to attract, I don't think anybody moved for $10,000. I mean, it's taxable income, and there's a cost associated to moving. So let's say that in the end you end up with $4,000 extra. You're not going to go move somewhere that you don't want to be in for that. But it removes risk, right? And it helps. It helps with some of the barriers. So by far the biggest reason why people applied and ultimately moved was the community development opportunities, right? So I think, my background, I'm from Tulsa originally, grew up here, but then left for college, went to school in Boston, then worked in the music industry in New York, and then ended up actually at iTunes at Apple for nearly a decade in San Francisco. And after I quit and started consulting, I had the flexibility to work from wherever. And there were a lot of people in San Francisco who no longer had to be in San Francisco, but hadn't made the move to another place.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that there are obstacles in moving. And so, there's a lot of different obstacles. The cost, right? Like, where am I going to live? How am I going to, where am I going to find the same tacos that I found in San Francisco?
Sure. Very, very important.
Very important, right? But more than anything, like, how am I going to meet people? How am I going to get connected? How am I going to get involved in the community? I think most people want to have a positive impact in the community. And so our program was just completely focused on removing as many barriers as possible that prevent people from taking that risk, right? Like, everybody talks about Denver or Austin or Nashville or Portland because they're kind of safe bets. Well, Tulsa might not be a safe bet. So let's remove the barriers so that you can see that it's actually a really great option.
That's fascinating. Even at GitLab, we actually have a pretty high concentration of people in the Bay Area that, because we're all remote, technically don't still need to be there. But a lot of them came to us from a company where they were located there. Mm-hmm. They've just hung around. Like, they enjoy the fact that they don't have the commute anymore.
Right.
But sure, some of them actually love being there. Like, it's home for them now. They don't want to move. But it is one of those things. It's like, how many of them want to move maybe back to whatever is home to them, or a more rural place, lower cost of living, that kind of thing, but just don't because of the friction. It's like, it's hard to find time to even think about it. That's
Yeah.
interesting. That's
Yeah. I
interesting.
mean, I moved a lot of different times, right? And the obstacle was, the biggest obstacle was always just getting back connected and feeling like I had a sense of community and belonging to something. Um, and even for me, when I moved back to Tulsa, so I came back to Tulsa without a plan. I was lucky. I worked for Apple from, before there was an app store to after we launched Apple Music. So I had a little bit of a safety net. I could move and not have a gig and kind of figure it out. And I was doing some consulting. But most of my time went to building my community. And luckily in Tulsa, it was a lot easier than it was in other places, but there are still obstacles that came with that. Not, you're saying like you have plenty of people who live in the Bay Area who don't have to anymore. I love San Francisco. I mean, I loved living there. For me, though, there was something more that I wanted to do with my time. Like I'd always talked about how am I going to volunteer or get involved in things that matter to me. And it was really difficult to do that in the city, right? Like my background is in music. How do I get involved in the music scene in San Francisco if I'm not doing it full time? Obviously iTunes helped me, but if how do I go and work at, how do I get on the board of the symphony, or like, how do I get involved in some initiative that really matters to me? The barriers even for volunteering are pretty high. And,
Yeah.
you know, I just think that there are a short list of cities that everybody looks to as secondary options from one of those major cities. And there are legitimate, let's say, oversaturation of people who are moving there. And
Yeah.
so it benefits everybody if there are more options. And I think there are a lot more options out there.
So do you think, I completely agree with that. Do you think the barriers are fewer to volunteering, connecting with communities, so on and so forth in Tulsa? Is that why people move there? Because I'll give you the perspective from All Remote. We try to, we'll hire people from almost anywhere in the globe. And one of the key reasons why people want to do that is it allows them to stay in that community, wherever it may be, that matters the most to them. So they're able to like help with Habitat for Humanity in a community that they live in, that they can tangibly see it. But this is a slightly different situation where you want people to move from one place to a specific new place. And so what's the draw there? Is Tulsa just more amenable to that?
I mean, I'm obviously biased, but I think the answer is yes. I mean, you have to come visit Tulsa to see what's actually happening here. It's just a weird, perfect timing scenario where you've got a city of about 400,000, a little bit over 400,000, a metro area of around 1 million, and you've got huge foundations that are actively working on some pretty big initiatives, some things that you don't see in other cities. We've got Gathering Place, which opened last year, which is the largest private gift to a city in history, a $465 million park that has a $150 million endowment to provide programming forever. Right in the heart of Tulsa. You've got Lobeck Taylor Family Foundation that put together Mother Road Market, which is this incredible restaurant incubator and food hall on Route 66 that adds a level of vibrancy to a community that hasn't really existed before. I think there are more people per capita in Tulsa actively working to make this city the place they want to see in the future than anywhere else. It's not a utopia by any stretch, but it's a place where the hard work you put in leads to tangible results pretty quickly. It's a purple community, and so like your vote matters. The thoughts that you have, there are people who are looking to support and push those ideas forward.
So the people that are coming there for this program, they still work remotely. Like they may work for companies that are headquartered outside of Tulsa. Is that right?
They are, for sure. I mean, it's a requirement that the people who come through the program are employed with companies based out of outside of Tulsa County. So they all do. I mean, some people have actually found jobs in Tulsa since they moved here, and that's awesome, right? I mean, amazing talent, finding jobs locally is a great thing. But the vast majority of the people are employed with companies outside.
I think that's so fascinating from a municipal standpoint, where the traditional way of trying to build up a community or build up a tax base is to bring jobs to that town.
Right.
So the next thought is, let's build a building, build some offices in it, and then convince businesses or people to come occupy those buildings. But the shortcut to that is like, don't build any buildings. We don't need to add any new infrastructure like that. We just give people a compelling reason to come here and a community to rally around, and they can work from wherever. So you shortcut all of that. And I'm just curious, like, have you seen other towns try to replicate this? Is it something that you would hope to work with other towns on replicating it?
Dude, I mean, I think you get it, right? Historically, talent went where the jobs were. And that's the biggest shift that we're seeing, is that jobs now go where the talent is. I mean, Amazon HQ2 is a perfect example of it. And so, yeah, I think that going after the talented individuals and trying to create an ecosystem that not only supports remote work but celebrates remote workers is I mean, I'm obviously betting on that being the way of the future and will give us a leg up. And Tulsa has done a lot to embrace the work that we've done. I think that other cities should definitely do something similar. I don't know if they can compete with Tulsa, just in the fact that for the last 15 years, the leaders in this town have been doing so much to make downtown a really cool place to live. And there's some really interesting conversations about like social equity and equity in policing that are happening here in Tulsa that people would be surprised that are actually happening for a city this size in this part of the country, which makes it a really cool place for me. You know, obviously you can tell what I care about, for me to be involved in, because those are conversations that really matter to me. And I'm happy and proud that they're happening here in Tulsa. So, but I get communities reaching out to me regularly wanting to talk about how to attract these people, because I mean, we've gotten so many amazing individuals who apply for the program that it's obviously something that people want. People want to belong to something and be engaged in a community.
I think it's pretty bold of the leadership to say, let's invest in the communal aspect of this, such that even when people come here and their jobs aren't physically tied here, we still think it's going to be compelling enough that they'll want to stay and build a community. That's actually incredible, because it's one thing to say, well, we'll make them have to physically be here, then you can kind of get away with a lot of other stuff. But this kind of flips that on its head, where you need to build the community. So even though they're free to leave, they stay there. I'll say at GitLab, we've scaled to the point now where there are some subsections of the world. Bay Area is a good example. Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina is a good example. Pacific Northwest, where we have location channels and sort of sub communities within GitLab, where we've hired enough people in a certain region that they kind of self-congregate and they have their own little get-togethers, meetups, things like that. But one thing that we hear about often is the battle of isolation. So if you're the only person in one specific spot, and it's a rural place, chances are low that you're going to really build a huge community there. Do you think that something like Tulsa Remote is a potential answer for that isolation, where if you just like, I love my job, I love working remotely, I love that I don't have to move to a huge urban center, but I'm really struggling with finding community?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that is definitely a huge component of this whole program, is that there is an economic benefit to cities that provide a sense of belonging and resolve the issues with isolation. And I think Tulsa has done a really good job with Tulsa Remote and other programs of helping resolve those issues. So I would love it if in the future there's enough presence of people in GitLab in Tulsa that they have their own community. But let's say that there's only one or two people here. The fact that they can jump into something like Tulsa Remote and have a sense of community that's completely separate from their company, but are surrounded by people who understand the challenges that come with the type of work they do, that's amazing. You know, we really try to bring in really strong people and then let them develop the culture. It's not something like we're sitting here telling them how to do things. And something that was really rewarding to me, there was a guy named Thomas who moved here from Boston in August, and it was 2 weeks after his wife had had their second kid. They had waited until the child was born before they moved out here. The cohort decided to put together a meal train for their family on their own. So for the first month that they were here, every single day they had somebody bringing food to them to ensure that they were like taken care of in the community. And I know that's a huge lift, but that's pretty easy when you consider that everybody just had to do it once. But people rallied around. There is no question that people want to help each other and want to belong to something. And as that becomes less possible with companies, if they're remote and you don't have that sense of community locally, but you might have it online, there's such an opportunity for us to find a way to to fight against that with other things. And I think cities should take note.
Yeah. I'm biased towards remote as well, but what I hear in that is I've noticed this kind of nuance in remote workers where they can be isolated in working alone. So when they get the opportunity to rally around something like that, they go full bore. Where people that have to commute into a co-located space every single day, there's this weird thing that happens where you sort of take the faces you see every day for granted. You just see them every day. It's less of a special type of situation where everyone working, even if you're in a co-working space and everyone knows that they're working remotely, they're empathetic to the fact that all of the people that each individual is working with is not where they are. So whatever opportunity they do have to help people in person, IRL, they rally around it. And I'm that's just generally speaking. I'm sure there are exceptions to that, but that resonates. On the GitLab side, we see that, like with micro communities, if someone is having a family issue or struggling in some way, the groups rally really quickly. It's like the first thing that comes to mind is, how can I jump in there and help?
I think that's beautiful. I think you're totally right. There's a lot of misconceptions, especially when we came down this path, when I deal with certain leaders in the community who would question like what we're doing with this whole remote thing. There's misconceptions that people who work remotely or work from home are not very social, they're introverted, or they're not really great communicators. It's actually the opposite, I found. First of all, remote workers are some of the best communicators I've ever known. They have to, because back in the day, it used to be that if I had to do more than 2 emails to resolve an issue, I'd walk over to that person's desk,
Yeah.
actually interact with them in person, because it wasn't working, right? But you don't get that option when you're working remotely. So you have to be so strong at communication. And I think that you are exactly right. In real life, people are much more intentional about the social in-person interactions, because I think they just value it so much more, instead of being oversaturated with it during the day in a kind of an enforced environment. So we see within the cohort that came in the first year of Tulsa Remote, and I'm sure we'll see it this next year, that there's an amazing support system, and people are including others and ensuring that everybody is included in the activities that are happening. And I don't think you see that in a normal office environment.
It's incredible. I mean, look, you can just afford to be more empathetic when you don't sit in traffic for 2 to 4 hours a day.
Totally.
I mean, honestly, at its like base level, you can just afford to be a happier, healthier, more well-rested person to jump in on issues like that when so much of your life isn't consumed with something like a wasteful commute at the very, very base level.
Yeah, I think that's so right. And with this program, we removed even more barriers that come with transition in a new community. And so these people are using those energies into the things that matter to them. So they're volunteering, they're getting involved in issues. And what else is really cool is that these individuals work for companies that aren't based here. So they're not worried about what their employer thinks about the things that they're doing and taking a stand on locally, which lets them be a lot more vocal. I'm really excited to see how fast Tulsa grows because of this small group of individuals that have come. I mean, it's not going to be small after next year. It's a big group of really cool people from all over the world that are kind of coming into Tulsa. But the power that they have is pretty unbelievable. And so, I don't expect everybody to want to leave the Bay Area and move to Tulsa, Oklahoma. But I do think that there is a group of individuals that are looking for a different type of lifestyle, where they get to have the urban lifestyle, but the ease of life is a little bit higher, and they can use that energy towards things that they're really passionate about and potentially affecting change.
It's really interesting that what's going to happen in the future is the economic viability of a city, or the vision of how much it's thriving, is not going to be how many skyscrapers did it gain year over year.
Yeah.
It's going to be something much deeper. It's like the actual economic boom is going to be happening without the buildings. It's going to be at the people and the intelligence and the community that's being built as more and more remote workers center around a given town. It's fascinating. Like that just kind of hit me when you said that. It's like the vision of what a thriving community looks like isn't going to be tied to the skyline anymore. It's going to be very
Absolutely. I think it's brilliant. And ensuring that we talk a lot about ensuring that continued growth and success in cities are inclusive of all. And I think remote work has the potential to truly be that inclusive piece, to ensure that every individual with disabilities, with different needs, has an opportunity to be an incredibly valued member of a team and an additive part of the economy.
I love it, man. So look, let's wrap up with what's next for Tulsa Remote. Where do you see this going? What's next for you?
Well, I mean, the coolest thing about this program is that the cohort that we brought in is so passionate about what we're doing. They're involved in every aspect of bringing in this next group, and I think that's really cool to me. I think that Tulsa Remote is going to grow into more than just the $10,000 to move to Tulsa. It's about really developing that ecosystem in Tulsa that, as I said, celebrates remote workers and helps resolve typical issues. I've been thinking about things like co-working spaces, right? People like co-working spaces, but they're not made for remote workers a lot of times. They're made for a different type of worker. And how can we create spaces that are better for remote workers? But more than anything, how can Tulsa really welcome in all of the ancillary remote workers that are choosing to move here even when they're not part of the program? How can Tulsa Remote be bigger than what we envisioned to this point? And then how can I work with other communities to ensure that a rising tide lifts all ships? It's pretty much
Awesome.
where I'm at.
I love that. And for all the viewers, I'm going to be sure to put the links that we've discussed in the YouTube description below. Aaron, how can people get in touch with you? Are you on social media?
I am on social media, Instagram, Aaron Belsley, Bolzle. But you all can reach out at info@tulsaremote.com. I check that email account regularly. But tulsaremote.com has the application, and we've gotten a huge response, but we're also going to bring in a lot more people. And I try my best to make space for really great people who want to be part of this. And I hope that anybody who's interested reaches out.
That's amazing. We're going to add this to our handbook around managing isolation, looking for communities like this.
That's awesome.
Thanks very much, Aaron. Appreciate it.
All right.